German deep-sea fishermen, working in extreme conditions through wind and storm, day and night. The hunt for black halibut leads the crew all the way to Greenland.
Up to minus 20 degrees Celsius is okay. If you work here, you're probably already a little crazy and a little tougher in general.
The ships are specially constructed to handle loads over 1,000 metric tons and are equipped for the roughest seas.
They have to take more load from the sea and the bad weather than many other vessels.
It takes approximately 1 year to build one of these state-of-the-art ships. Below deck, the processing plant. Fish is processed here 24 hours a day. Despite the huge quantities, precision is key.
These are going straight to the customer. If I mess up the packaging, then we have a real problem.
It has to be just right. The tail can't be too long or too short.
This voyage's final destination, West Greenland.
After you've been out for 3 or 4 days and torn through 1,000 miles, you start to understand how big it is.
The crew members must trust each other blindly.
We're one big family here, otherwise the work wouldn't get done.
There's a lot that needs attention since everything is changing constantly.
Fishing in extreme conditions can mean big consequences, even for small errors.
Of course, the worst thing would be if the main engine failed. If there was a blackout and everything went dark.
There's really nothing we can do now.
The German ocean trawler Mark is moored at the jetty of the fishing harbor in Bremerhaven, Germany. In a few hours, it will head to Greenland. At nearly 100 meters long and 16 meters wide, the ship is one of the largest ocean trawlers in the German fleet. The crew loads up the ship with supplies, among them tons of food, a stock to last weeks, even months. Captain Sascha von Sta is tense. The clock is ticking, and he's still waiting on a food truck.
We're held up. The truck is probably stuck in traffic on the highway. There's nothing we can do about it except wait.
The ship's company boards and packs up the supplies. The food has to last for months. Vitamins are especially important. Cook Sebastian Vorpitz makes sure everything is stowed correctly.
I'd say due to the temperatures we have here, we can count on the fresh fruit and vegetables lasting up to 2 months.
In the engine room, Jan Prusing checks over all systems. He's known as the chief on board. The ship's life insurance policy for the North Atlantic seas is its heavy-duty diesel fuel, providing over 5,000 horsepower to counter wind and waves. The ocean trawler Mark will travel to West Greenland, where it will fish for black halibut. The journey to the fishing area is long. The crew has more than 2,000 nautical miles ahead of it. Astern, the second steersman checks that the trawl door has been correctly secured. During fishing, these steel boards, which weigh tons, keep the nets apart. On the last voyage, the nets came loose during a storm. This is just one of the officer's many tasks.
I'm second steersman, which means I take care of everything. I'm the ship's handyman, so to speak. I take care of injuries, make sure stock is taken. I take care of orders, things on deck. And if they need someone in the plant, I take care of that too.
Sascha von Sta is tense. The truck carrying the rest of the supplies still hasn't arrived.
The problem is that our departure window at the lock lasts until 4 p.m. At that point, we stop being a priority, and we have to wait for the tide to come back in, since it's out and we're in too deep.
How long?
12 hours.
A delay is looming. Not a good start for the journey. Fishing is money, and every day counts. The supply truck has arrived. Now it's a matter of minutes. In the engine room, Chief Jan Prusing starts the diesel engine. Outside, the first steersman surveys the loading from the ship's bridge. Hundreds of kilograms of supplies. The lock's deadline is getting closer and closer.
How much time? Only about 10 minutes.
The ship is all clear to set sail. The crew gets to work loosening the heavy ropes. On the bridge, the harbor pilot is now in control.
The double lock for the mark.
The ocean trawler Mark sets off. The time is nearly up. Only minutes remain. Just made it. The trawler sets course for the north. Once the ship reaches the Weser River, the harbor pilot disembarks. His job is done. The journey begins. It will be a week before they arrive in Greenland. The sailors will need the time to prepare the ship. Some 2,000 nautical miles lie between the men and the fishing area. First, Captain Sascha von Sta will steer the ship towards Scotland and then make course for West Greenland. From now on, the ship's bridge is occupied around the clock.
Tomorrow morning we'll already be past the German Bight. Now we're heading towards Pentland and then on towards West Greenland.
Ocean trawlers are specially made ships. They're constructed in shipyards like this one in Gdynia, Poland. The German Fishing Union Company has chosen to build their latest generation of ships here. They will enhance the German deep-sea fishing fleet. This is a site of massive proportions, where thousands of tons of steel are produced and welded. Soon, the ships will be afloat across the world's seas, so they need to be able to handle some pressure.
They have to take more load from the sea and the bad weather than many other vessels.
It will be months before these ships are launched, but even then, they will just be shells. The German fleet's ocean trawlers are only brought to buoyancy here in Poland. There's a separate shipyard which will build the ship's interior and technology. This shell appears finished from the outside, but it's an illusion. After the dry dock has been flooded, it can only barely float on water. Still, the ship is preparing for its first big voyage, in which it will be hauled along to Norway.
Then we're going from here to Norway, to Ulsteinvik as a shipyard, who is going to finish the hull with the last equipment and everything.
The dry dock will be pumped full of millions of liters of water over the next few hours. This will determine whether the ship frame will stay afloat. Ocean trawler Cuxhaven is undergoing its first performance test. There's a nervousness among the shipyard workers. The water level rises slowly. As a safety precaution, the ship is also being suspended by a crane. By the evening, the dry dock has been almost completely flooded. The ship is now surrounded by water, and it floats. However, the ship is still being suspended. A tugboat is being prepared to haul the ship to Norway. Ocean trawler Mark is on its way to West Greenland. It's Mario Fett's turn on the bridge. The first steersman is on night watch. Outside, it's stormy. Waves, several meters high, are breaking against the ship. On the North Sea, the weather's often rough, biting winds and ice-cold water. For ocean trawler Mark, these conditions are no problem at all.
The weather is getting increasingly chilly and the wind is rising steadily. We're at a solid 8-9 right now.
The weather is also known to be stormy in the fishing area of West Greenland, where fish are caught despite the unfavorable conditions.
You can still find fish at 8 to 10 meters, but at some point after that, it starts to get sketchy. You have to watch out for the direction of the sea current.
On board, life begins at sunrise. Sailor Axel Dirks is doing his rounds, waking up the crew.
Moi!
Escape with me, I'll hold you tight, let
Mooi. Mooi, Ingo. Mooi. Mooi, Jacob. Jacob. Hallo. Mooi, Molly. Mooi, Didier. Mooi, Betty. Betty. Betty.
Some people just don't want to wake up. They'll say yes, but then they go straight back to sleep.
Good morning.
Cook Sebastian Vorpitz is responsible for meals. His day begins at 5 a.m. with breakfast. For breakfast, it's pancakes for 20 people. Portions on board are somewhat bigger. The stove is on 24 hours a day to ensure that there are no delays.
You always keep the two main burners on a low setting so that you can come down in the morning and turn it on and have the stove up and running in half an hour instead of an hour and a half.
Sebastian Vorpitz must cook 3 meals a day and make sure that there's something edible on offer around the clock.
Today I'm making pancakes. First crack the eggs, then put the flour in, mix it all together and then fry the pancakes. Now we're looking for all the ingredients so we can start.
Food is important for morale, especially at sea. Sebastian Vorpitz knows this well. He always tries to provide for the crew's wishes. No easy task. The team has a lot to do. After breakfast, they go upstairs to work on deck. As soon as they start fishing, the men work in shifts. Therefore, it's always someone's turn to work and someone's turn to eat. For the cook, that's a real challenge.
Of course, it's impossible to satisfy everyone's taste. The boys all come from different places, and some of them like it like this, and some of them like it like that. But you also have people on board who usually cook themselves. As they say, everyone can cook, except the cook.
Below deck, the crew members are preparing for their shifts. Dennis Bachert is the ship's foreman, or bosun as he's known on board. This is his first voyage in this new role. In the engine room, the chief is adjusting the engines. From now on, the ship will run on heavy fuel, which is a lot cheaper, but only permitted outside of coastal waters. The heavy fuel is thicker and must be kept warm non-stop. In the galley, the cook is planning lunch. Sailor Axel Dirks is lending a hand until fishing starts. They're both battling the weather.
Man, what a shaky ride this is today. Here we go again.
It's quite the day today again.
Oh no, stupid egg packaging.
Keep your cool.
Usually, any chopped up bio-waste goes overboard.
You can't throw it here. It'll end up elsewhere. Hey man, I've got the eggs here. Can't do it.
The ocean trawler Mark is now 3 days into its voyage. Before it reaches the fishing area, it will pick up more sailors at the port of Nuuk in Greenland. Last night's storm has cost the crew time, and Captain Sascha von Staab must make sure they arrive promptly. He doesn't have a lot of leeway.
I'd estimate that we lost 6 hours due to the weather. But we're still on track. I think we can still make it to Nuuk on time.
The sailors begin their work on deck. They must prepare the ship for fishing, which doesn't allow for much downtime. Fishing boats must work in order to be profitable. Dennis Bachert is the foreman on this voyage. As bosun, he leads a team and is responsible for his men.
Yeah, you definitely have a bit more responsibility. Before, it was always just a matter of standing around and doing what you were told. Someone else was in charge and you just followed the orders. But when you're in charge yourself, it's a completely different thing.
The sailors create space on deck for the nets. To do this, they must move tons of material. Without the heavy windlasses, it won't work. On board, the injury risk is high. These bearings, which hold down the nets, weigh over 50 kilos each.
You can move them on your own, but when they fall on your foot, it hurts.
The sailors are wearing safety boots and helmets. Still, the work is dangerous. Out at sea, carelessness or little mistakes can have serious consequences. Below deck, the fish processing plant is being set up. Here, fish manager Torsten Neupert is in charge. He's one of the 2 fish managers on board. The plant was rebuilt and expanded back at the port. It's updated for each new catch. Now everything must be set up afresh. Torsten Neupert pays close attention. Mistakes made now can be fatal later.
There's still a lot of preparatory work to be done. We do it systematically, first tackling the most difficult things and areas which could turn up any errors. Then we do the smaller jobs, the fine-tuning at the end. The plant should be ready for the first catch, so we can get going immediately.
On board, steel cables are being spliced. Back-breaking work, which involves weaving several individual steel strands into one thick rope. The sailors build a device which can undo even the strongest cables. This rope, called the trawl warp, will later support the net, so it must be able to withstand immense pressure.
There was a kink in the trawl warp, meaning that if we're fishing and it's under tension, it could tear. So we're changing it now and splicing it again. Then we'll splice both lines together and remove the damaged part. If it all tears once we're already fishing, that would cause a much bigger headache than if we resplice it now.
In the fish processing plant, the fish manager continues his inspection. The cold room is located deep in the bowels of the ship.
The temperature keeps going down, we're still ramping it up, but soon it will be minus 30 degrees Celsius in here, which is something else. But if we really have stuff to do, then you'll be sweating at minus 30.
Meanwhile, the sailors have secured the trawl warp. Now they turn the large steel wheel to unravel the individual strands. Then the ends are pulled in and spliced together. Later, this cable will support the fishing net. It must not tear under any circumstances. If this were to happen, it would constitute a mortal danger for the sailors.
Here you can see just how thick these cables are. It's not something that you pull cars with. It needs to be really strong. These cables have to take several bars of pressure. That's why you have to trust yourself and your colleagues. We have to work together here, and if we don't, then it just won't work.
On board, camaraderie is emphasized. The men can be at sea for months. They help each other out wherever they can.
I just asked if anyone knows how to do it, and here we are.
There are some guys who do it themselves, and then of course others who don't know how to cut their own hair, in which case they help each other out.
But being away from home isn't always easy. It can be a burden for the sailors.
I don't think you can really imagine the extent to which you're deprived of things out here. You can't help if there are problems at home. Sometimes it's really hard. You're here, your wife is at home with some big problem, and you can't do anything about it. All you can do is console her on the phone. What kind of consolation is that? It sucks.
The crew prepares the deck for fishing. The trawl doors must be fastened onto heavy chains. Soon they will be attached to the outside of the ship. Each trawl door weighs 6 tons. During fishing, they are dragged along the ocean floor. The doors keep the net stretched out.
It has to be exactly 6 meters. Now the other side. Hey, Midish, what have you got? Exactly 6 meters? Great. That's how the captain wants it. So the trawl doors are placed correctly.
The trawl doors run parallel to each other in the water at a depth of over 1,000 meters. Still, a difference of a few centimeters can determine whether they work properly or not. If these steel doors aren't placed correctly in the water, fewer fish will come into the net. Handling the doors on deck can be dangerous.
When you're moving the trawl doors, you have to make sure everyone is out of the way. When the sea moves them around and the ship veers, if anyone's standing there, they can get hit pretty bad. It's the kind of thing you hear about. Trawl door to the foot, then you lose half your foot. Thankfully, I've never seen it, only heard of it. Knock on wood.
At the shipyard in Gdynia, workers are preparing to transport a ship shell. The ship is being tugged to Norway for final assembly. The preparations lasted the entire night. Such a giant ship requires the highest precision. The ocean trawler is being pulled by the tugboat Fenja, whose home port is Copenhagen in Denmark. With a length of 34 meters, it's a heavyweight in its own right.
And now they are connecting the tug to our boat and preparing for towing to Norway.
The tugboat is now practically touching the trawler. Down below, a man takes hold of the line. The ship is still attached to heavy crane ropes.
Here behind us, it's a lot of heavy canes because the vessel, the hull, is very heavy and have to be the towing lines and the canes have to be strong enough to stand all the weather conditions they might meet on the way.
The ship is still being supported by a crane. Later, however, just one tugboat will haul the trawler across the open sea to Norway. The crane lowers a heavy chain onto the trawler. The chain is attached to a guide rope, which will latch onto the tugboat. The chain, which weighs several tons, is secured by means of a lock. The next day, the Cuxhaven is ready for its voyage. 2 tugboats transport the shell out onto the open sea. Just one of them will take the ship onwards to Norway. If the weather complies, the journey to Norway lasts 5 days. Once there, the ship will be fully equipped. 6 months later, the brand new ocean trawler will be ready for action. Ocean trawler Mark has arrived at the southern tip of Greenland in the North Atlantic Ocean. Icebergs pass by, a grave danger for ships. Icebergs are common in these waters. They break off on the Greenland coast and then float around the open sea. The bridge requires exceptional vigilance. The ocean trawler Mark has almost reached its destination. The port of Nuuk is only a day's journey away. But the coastal icebergs pose a real threat for the trawler. Not all of them are detected by the radar system.
What's also dangerous about icebergs is that they have a large radius. And usually the ice is 7/8 below the water. You can't let yourself be fooled by thinking the ice you see above the water is all the ice that's there. You can't get too close to them and definitely can't make contact. At best, the ship gets a dent. At worst, the ship is done for, meaning there's water in the ship, which is something we always want to avoid.
In the fish processing plant, nothing works without water. Fish manager Torsten Neupert checks the appliances. From the first catch onwards, everything has to run smoothly. Soon, the conveyor belts will bring the catch directly to the workstations 24 hours a day. Hold-ups mean losses.
Now we're running through all the technical operations which we use during the halibut processing to correct mistakes, improve things, and wash everything down, properly disinfect it, and see if any mistakes crop up which we can deal with before tomorrow while we still have time. And then after that, we can start processing.
On deck, final preparations are made. Later, the nets will be attached to a heavy steel cable called a trawl warp. The men have already re-spliced the cable, which is 1 kilometer long. Now it's being rolled up again. The steel cable, itself extremely heavy, is attached to heavy chains. The trawl doors weigh 6 metric tons each. Soon, this will be increased by the weight of the nets and maybe a big catch. The equipment must withstand huge forces. Bosun Dennis Bachert is in charge of all the equipment. As foreman, the buck stops with him down on deck. This demands concentration, especially when dealing with chains and ropes under pressure.
If you take a chain to the head, even with a helmet, it's dangerous. There's several tons of pressure there. If you take a chain to the head, then that's that.
The trawl doors are underwater and will later be fixed to the ship's stern. They keep the net stretched out underwater. The sailors on board are patching any remaining holes in the net. It's a real craft, like knitting with a jumbo-sized needle. Years of practice turn the sailors into pros. Later, during the catch, this will all have to happen lightning fast. Every minute counts, even if the voyage lasts weeks and months. If the nets are defective, money is lost. The ocean trawler is entering the fjord of the port city of Nuuk. Within hours, it will have reached its destination. In the galley, Axel Dirks and cook Sebastian Vorpitz are preparing the next meal.
Look, Axel, shall we make big or small ones? I think the small ones are enough, right? I'll cut the pork chops. Wait, get the chops out? I'll take a slightly bigger inset.
Ocean trawler Mark is approaching the Greenland port city of Nuuk, where it will pick up more sailors who have arrived from Germany via plane. Their last fishing voyage was only 1 week ago. Above Nuuk Bay, the northern lights are flashing. The crew lowers the dinghy into the water. To save time, this dinghy will pick up the latecomers at the pier. 9 sailors have joined from Germany. The Mark's crew is now complete. From now on, the 29 men will be traveling together. After a few hours, the ship turns back towards the open sea. The captain takes course for the fishing area.
We still have around 110 miles ahead of us, and then we'll finally get to work.
The next morning, ocean trawler Mark arrives at the fishing area west of Greenland 7 days after setting sail. The team is fired up. Until now, there's been plenty of work, but no real income. The men each have a stake in the catch. A good catch means good money. 28-year-old Hannes Krüger joined the crew in Greenland. He was 15 when he first went to sea. His last shore leave was short, only 1 week.
The last voyage I was on lasted 90 days.
Captain Sascha von Sta is preoccupied with fishing, but new icebergs have been spotted. He must be careful. The radar is not a guarantee.
Watching from the lookout is always crucial. There are icebergs which have been heavily washed away and are therefore undetectable by the radar. If we hit an iceberg at 15 knots, then the front of the ship will be badly disfigured and the journey must be cut short.
Bosun Dennis Bachert is checking the nets. The team is laying both nets out on deck. They will use the nets to catch the black halibut at depths of over 1,000 meters. There's another ship in the fishing area. It's also part of the German fleet, but it will go home shortly. The sister ship had a good catch.
Our gear's ready for fishing and we're all clear for our first catch. I'm glad we're getting going. The reports aren't bad so far, between 15 and 17 metric tons a day. That's pretty decent. I'm always happy when it finally gets going.
The fishing area has been reached. Fishing will begin in just a few hours. The ship has state-of-the-art equipment. Even the fishing net relies on technical assistance. Bosun Dennis Bachert attaches sensors which will show the captain how the net is running above ground. He can use this to draw some conclusions, but he can't see everything.
We're fishing according to depth here. We're scouting out different depths and seeing what they produce. We'll adjust our fishing location, equipment, and go a bit deeper or shallower, depending on what we find. Up here is a depth of 260 to 70 to 80 meters. It's a long plateau. And then here it goes down to 1,200 meters. We're basically fishing right on a mountain.
On this voyage, the permitted catch quota is 765 metric tons. If this is not achieved within the time frame, then the voyage is a failure. Nerves are running high.
What are you doing with the batteries? Are you just taking them for a stroll? The day has 24 hours and you have to use them as sensibly as possible. Playing around is no good. You have to use the time as efficiently as possible. It starts with every action on deck and carries on up here on the bridge.
Bosun Dennis Bachat must hurry to finally get the net in. The second net must also be ready so that one of them is in the water at all times. Finally, 7 days after setting sail at Bremerhaven, the first net is lowered into the water. The sailors let it down slowly. From the side, the crew checks that everything's running smoothly. Meter by meter, the net sinks down into the water. Suddenly, the net gets caught. The cables are snagged on the reel. Valuable time is passing. Dennis Bachat takes a crowbar and releases the steel cable. Both nets must be ready. The net is lowered into the water. The cables which attach to the catch equipment are 3 kilometers long. Today, the net will sink up to 1,000 meters into the ocean. The heavy trawl doors sink down with the net and keep it from tangling underwater. At the same time, they herd the fish to the front of the net due to the water pressure building up. It takes the equipment half an hour to reach floor level. The fishing has begun. The atmosphere on board is a mixture of routine and nervousness. Now the crushed bio-waste can finally be dealt with.
You've got to give it a proper swing. Push it downwards, and it's off. But when you have a serious breeze, you have to be careful not to get everything in your face or let it fly across deck. There he is. Morning, Axel, you're back.
Sailor Axel Dirks tries his hand at plumbing. The heated basin's drain is clogged.
That's clogged. So now we put the fresh water in, if I can find it.
What's the problem this time? A bit of crap just came up.
Well, now we have to clean everything.
I'll get a bucket and cloth.
Oh. And now I'm wet.
Everything okay? If not...
There's nothing to be done here. Give me that. Yeah, it's all obstructed here.
Axel, calm down.
The Mark is dispatching its first net of the tour. The captain is aided by a lot of technology, but experience is still needed.
The technology is definitely helpful. Before, when captains could only work with echo sounders, it took years to master it. Nowadays, it takes less time. But to be a successful fisherman, it's not enough to just work through an Excel table. It just won't work. There's no replacement for experience.
The catch sensor is showing up on the monitor. Something big is in the net.
We were just panicking that the net is broken, and now the second sensor is showing. Everything's back to normal. Soon we can see what's in there.
The crew is preparing for the final haul of the voyage. The sailors wear oilskins and helmets when working on deck. It's slippery, and heavy swells can cause the heavy chains to come close overhead. The net has been in the water for several hours, at a depth of 1,000 meters. Now the catch sensor has been triggered. It will still be another half an hour before the net is raised. Will it be a big catch or a false alarm? It remains to be seen.
Ja, bis das Geschirr anfängt.
We can't count on anything until the equipment starts to come back up.
Jetzt erstmal gar nichts orientieren.
The team has a stake in the catch. If the net is full, they'll earn good money. 1,000 meters of trawl warp are being rolled up. Then the net can come on board. The ocean trawler is only allowed to fish within a strictly defined zone. The devices detected something in the net, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. There can be other causes.
Das kann alles Mögliche sein. Es kann sein,
It could be anything. It could be that we fished up some old net material and that triggered the catch sensor. It could be something that got caught and then went loose again, or that we fished up something old.
Könnte auch sein, dass wir irgendwas Altes aufgefischt haben.
An old net or a successful catch? The crew can only wait. Then the trawl doors come to the surface. It won't be long now before the net is here. But working with the trawl doors is dangerous. Every move must be exact. A door like this weighs 6 tons. Sailor Hannes Krüger secures it by hand using a heavy iron chain.
Bring it up.
The door is pulled up
Bring it up.
and must then be adjusted.
A little more.
Hannes Krüger signals to the bridge that he needs more line. As if on cue, the radio signal has cut out right before the first catch. Captain Sascha von Sta operates the winch from the bridge. The heavy steel trawl door gives way and slips back down.
Bring it up.
Hannes Krüger tries to secure the trawl door, but the chain slips through.
Chain is stuck.
He bends down in between the trawl door and the ship and manages to hold onto the safety rope. Now the door is hanging in the right position.
Good.
The net is pulled up further onto the deck.
Now we're yanking it up so we can take up the chain.
The work down on deck is hard and also dangerous. Since we've all experienced being on deck as sailors, we know what that's like.
Along with the net come the whales. They can hear the fishing operation from kilometers away underwater. For the beaked whales, the net means easy prey. They snatch the fish out of the end of the net. The first catch is raised on deck. Will it be a hit or a miss? The first signs are good. The net is packed full of tons of black halibut. It was worth it. Now it's a matter of minutes. The net has to be emptied so that the other net can go into the water as soon as possible. On deck, the hatch leading to the fish processing plant is opened. The net is opened by hand. No machines can help here. It's a question of elbow grease.
So we've got our first catch. Yeah, I think we got a lot. It's looking good. Really good haul.
15 tons of black halibut. The net is raised by the crane so the sailors can empty it more easily. Snow shovels are used to push the fish through the hatch, from where they fall into the tanks of the fish processing plant. Captain Sascha von Sta oversees the first catch from the bridge.
Yeah, not bad. I'd guess 12 tons. That's really respectable.
Immediately after the catch, the second net is cast out. This task is one for the second bosun and his team. The captain makes a sharp turn back to the catch area. The second net should enter the water as soon as possible.
My motto is always time is money, and fishing is no exception. You need to catch fish quickly in order to make money. You have to fish the quotas dry. It has to go quickly, but also stay on a secure level. You have to find the exact balance.
The first catch was good. The faster the quota is fished up, the faster the sailors get back home. After working on deck, the next stop is the fish processing plant. The catch needs to be processed. The fish have only been out of the water for a few minutes. From the tank, they're transported to the various stations of the plant. From now on, the plant will be running around the clock. The first station is the head machine, where the black halibut's heads are removed. It's important to place the cut just behind the head so that the client doesn't complain. The heads are also sold separately.
The first place the fish comes after being up on deck is what we call the passage here. The passage is made up of 3 parts. First is the head machine, where a colleague decapitates the fish, sort out any misplaced bass, as well as the bycatch. However, there doesn't seem to be too much of it here.
The bycatch is also processed. Nothing is thrown overboard. After all, it's illegal. The heads are packed separately and sold to Asian customers.
We've actually cooked it before. Tastes really good. Cut the cheeks off, very tasty. The small ones they use for stock and for making fish soup. The tails have to have a certain cut. The length needs to be right. It can't be too long or too short. It should be a perfect length. The same is true for the heads. They should have the so-called Japan cut. That means the fish shouldn't be cut at an angle, but also not straight. The clients request it like that, and we cut accordingly. The next step is, of course, the cleaning. We remove the roe and the milk as well as the blood vessels, so that the fish is completely clean from the inside. That is very, very important.
Each fish's tail is cut off individually by hand. With 15 metric tons of fish, that's a lot of tails. Assembly line production on the high seas. Well paid, but monotonous. The men listen to music over headphones as they work, changing the stations now and then. Down here, for business to be profitable, things need to be running non-stop 24 hours a day. The fish are weighed and then packed into their packaging. Later, they will be shipped around the whole world, often to Japan. The fish processing plant is completely underwater during production. Cleanliness is the top priority. From West Greenland to the global market at 10 kilos per packet, Ocean Trawler Mark is allowed to fish up to 765 tons on this voyage before it meets its quota. The first catch was good, possibly up to 15 tons. After being packed, the fish goes in the freezer, just hours after coming out of the water. 3 hours later, the fish is deep frozen. Mistakes are not allowed to happen here. It would be too late to correct them.
This is how the product will reach the client. If I mess up the packaging, then we have a real problem. For example, here I have S1 product, which means without head, just regular halibut. If I were to mark it down as heads, then the customer would receive this as heads. That's stupid, it can't happen. So you really need to look carefully.
Geht nicht. Also du musst wirklich echt gucken daran, ne?
Good concentration makes sure there is no rude awakening for the clients ashore.
Ich muss alleine sein.
I have to work alone. Working in pairs doesn't work. You just chat all the time. You need to concentrate on the work.
The last station is the cold room. It's always the same men who work here. Today, it's Dirk Bieber's shift.
Cold and a little stressful.
The cold room. This is where the packages filled with frozen goods are sent. Over 1,000 tons of frozen product are stored here. It's still empty for now. The ship is still at the beginning of its voyage. The men secure the first catch so that it doesn't get knocked off during a sea swell. The men ward off the minus 30-degree temperature with thick clothing. Sometimes they're down here for hours on end. The work is hard for both man and material.
The hydraulic oil used in here is aircraft oil, since it doesn't freeze. It takes a while to warm up, but afterwards it goes really quickly. The hydraulic oil costs a fortune.
The forklift is battery operated, but the batteries are in constant struggle with the permafrost. If the forklift breaks down, the men down here have a real problem. That's why the vehicle is attached to the heating during every break.
The battery always needs to be full. We don't know how long we're going to be down here. This is the cable to charge the battery. And now I'm attaching the heater. It's a regular power cable that gets attached so that the battery doesn't freeze.
Fresh fish, a dream for the cook. A part of the first catch goes straight into Sebastian Vorpitz's pan.
Really tasty fish today. We're going to go down in a minute and get some. Beautiful black halibut for lunch with stewed cucumbers and potatoes. It's going to rock.
Morning, Hansen.
Morning, Hansen.
Machen Sie alles
You
frisch,
making
oder?
everything fresh?
Yeah,
Nice.
I like fish, but I don't eat it too often. 3 portions of fish a week would be too much for me.
You can have bratwurst then.
So,
Just rinse this off before we put them in. And then we're good to go.
so. Dann wollen wir mal.
Black halibut from the North Atlantic.
Frisch ist frisch. Ne, nix.
Fresh is fresh. It doesn't get any better than this. It's pretty cool.
Also das ist schon echt cool. So, ich denke mal,
I think that'll be enough. Let's bring it upstairs.
In the engine room, maintenance work is on the agenda. The oil filter needs cleaning. For jobs like these, the chief enlists the help of a mechanic. In total, there are 4 crew members on board who are responsible for technology. The men work in 12-hour shifts, day and night. The engine is the heart of the trawler. It drives the ship and also provides power to the processing plant. If something goes wrong here, it could lead to a total blackout.
There are maintenance tasks to do every day. Fill up the oil, check the levels, check the filters. This here is something which needs doing every other week. They get dirty, get converted, taken out, and re-cleaned. It's normal work. Nothing extraordinary, but also something we don't do every day. It just needs to be done every other week.
After removal, the oil filters are placed in an ultrasound container where they are completely cleaned every 2 weeks. The importance of properly functioning machines and emergency systems will become clear soon enough. The Mark is not the only ship in action on the North Atlantic. Ocean trawler Gerda Maria is also in the fishing area. However, this ship will soon be traveling home. Captain Sascha von Staas sends 2 crew members over to obtain replacement parts for the radio system on deck. The sailors let the dinghy down into the water. The crew members are wearing safety suits. The water here in the Arctic Circle is only 3 degrees Celsius. If anyone falls in, they barely have a chance without these suits. Death sets in after only a few minutes. The sea appears flat, but for the small dinghy, these waves are quite high. The Gerda Maria has positioned itself against the wind so that the dinghy is protected. The package containing the radio equipment is lowered by rope. The sister ship Gerda Maria fulfilled its fishing quota and will soon return home. The Mark's crew, however, is just at the beginning. The men do not yet know how long they will remain at sea. So far, the catch has been good. On the way back, whales cross the dinghy's path. A treat even for long-serving sailors. Ocean trawler Mark has been out at sea for 2 weeks. The fishing is going well. The men still have their strength. But the work both out on deck and in the plant is hard and can drain your energy.
If we keep going at this rate for 2 or 3 weeks, that's fine. But if you have time to relax, you get exhausted. And then you have more time to think about how exhausted you are. If there aren't as many fish, for instance, then you sleep more and realize how worn out you really are.
Time for me to hit the hay and get some sleep.
The sailors work in shifts, 7 days a week, sometimes for months on end. Free time is a rarity. The cabins sleep 2 men each, but one of the sailors is always on duty.
This is my room. Come have a look. But it hasn't been cleaned up. Is that okay? I sleep on top. I usually sleep on the top bunk. I don't really mind where I sleep. It's not much, basically a small couch. Everyone has a little closet. But you don't need anything more. You can't exactly go out. So just a few work things. That's all you need.
The weather radar is predicting a storm. The dark spots show the wind strength. Strong winds mean rougher seas. The weather out here can change every minute. The gusts of wind get stronger and the waves higher. Storms are dangerous for the crew and bad for business. Fishing becomes more difficult, even at depths of 1,000 meters.
On a choppy sea, it's definitely harder. The fishing itself, first of all. Then we have to deal with the nets, which fly around a bit and don't stay stable like they do when it's calmer. Working on deck is obviously harder as well.
The sailors have a dangerous shift ahead of them. The storm is getting stronger. The waves loom larger and larger. In a few hours, the net will be pulled in. For this, the sailors will have to be on deck. The storm can even be felt in the kitchen.
The ship is actually equipped with railings, as you can see here on the stove, so you should be able to cook no matter how strong the winds are. You really have to stay alert, though, since everything's moving around.
The first steersman inspects the ship's hospital. During a storm, the injury risk is much higher than usual. Mario Fett has a solid training in first aid. His last course was not long ago. Injuries on board can be treated to a certain extent. In worst-case scenarios, the ship must reach a harbor, but that can take days. The pharmacy on board mainly offers strong painkillers. Out at sea, there's always something going wrong. Usually, this can be remedied immediately.
The most common are cuts through handling knives, which they need to use in the net. And the blades get blunt very quickly since the nets are very sandy. Or due to the concentrated strength required, they often slip off, or people cut themselves with the knives.
Cut wounds on board are not sewed, but stapled.
It works just like a normal stapler. You place it where you want to close the wound and just push the lever down. And then the staple comes out here, just a normal staple like you would use with paper, and it closes automatically. From my own personal experience, it's somewhat painful, but the pain doesn't last long. It's really not very dramatic or anything. The main thing is to close the wound and stop bleeding. You just have to hang in there, that's the problem. But it's not exactly pain-free.
Below deck, the crew is getting ready. The storm is raging and the work on deck is getting dangerous. Bosun Dennis Bachat is responsible for the team.
Make sure no one gets hit or falls overboard.
It's nighttime. The storm and the sea have now been raging for hours. The net is being pulled in. It's snowing and the wind is coming in sharp blasts. The crew can only wait.
Things start to happen now that you can't prepare for or are hard to anticipate. If a big wave breaks, it just happens at once and then something is flying around.
Yeah, it does get scary. You don't know what's happening. That's the worst thing.
From the bridge, the first steersman has a good view of things, but the snow is blowing thicker and thicker. The snowflakes are now coming at the ship horizontally, and visibility is getting weaker.
For the moment, it's still working. Up front, it's not a problem since we have so many electronic devices and not much shipping traffic. The situation astern is also fine to an extent, but if the snow drifts keep getting thicker and we get more of them, then it can get pretty hard to see. So you have to be extra careful.
The deck is covered in snow. The sailors are passing time. The deck is now extremely slippery due to the snow. When the net comes, it will be too dangerous. If anyone were to slip and go overboard, their chances of survival at night would be next to nothing. The team has set up a hose and are spraying the deck with salt water. This works even around freezing temperatures, since the salt water does not freeze. The crew can fish in any kind of weather, but in times like this, they're more cautious.
You have to respect the weather. When the wind gets up to 10 or 11, you have to really stay alert.
The second steersman will later be working between the lines. Now he's fastening himself with a belt. With strong winds like these, breakers can crash up onto the deck. The net is nearly up. The first steersman gives the orders from the bridge. The heavy trawl doors come up first. They're always secured by hand. Then the net comes on board. There are fish inside, but the storm is having its effect. It's nowhere near the 12 or 13 tons of a few days ago.
It's not so much, maybe around 5 metric tons. It's not great considering the trawling time, lower than usual.
The fishermen are disappointed. 5 tons is not a lot. The days before produced over double that. In order to stay profitable, each catch should bring in 10 tons of fish. Deep-sea fishermen are some of the maritime industry's biggest earners, but only when the catch is right. Everyone on board the Mark is now hoping for better weather.
The catch really isn't great. It could have been double that. The constantly changing weather makes it a bit harder, I think. The wind is now coming from the north before it was from the south. That changes the currents, and the fish are sensitive to that. We need a more stable weather situation now. But we're hoping that tomorrow will be better.
The storm has subsided. After nearly 20 hours, the seas surrounding Ocean Trawler Mark are finally smooth again. The crew is hoping for a better catch. The net is also easier to handle now, but the storm has left its marks on board. On the bridge, an antenna was torn off. The silver lining? It was only the TV antenna, which doesn't work at this latitude anyway. But it's not the only thing which is missing this morning on board the Mark.
For those who don't know, Germany.
The ship's flag was also torn off in the wind. A replacement is attached, a legal requirement.
Now we're putting a new one on so other ships know which country we're from, what nationality the ship is.
Only a few ships are sailing the seas under a German flag. Many ship companies changed their flags to save money, but the German deep-sea fleet continues to sail under a German flag.
You can attach it now, right?
But you can't hoist it yet.
The nautical officer first has to come and see if it's the right way around. Hey, black, red, and gold.
The sailors are happy to be sailing under a German flag. It guarantees them certain rights and better pay.
I'll probably keep doing this until retirement. Hopefully. I mean, it's also common for container ships to change their flags. I hope it doesn't happen, because fortunately, the fishing quotas are tied to nationality. So I don't think it will change too quickly. All right, hoist it up a bit more. Great.
The calmer weather means a better catch. Now every catch is returning upwards of 10 tons. The fish is sold as soon as it's on board. Captain Sascha von Sta keeps in constant contact with the fishing authorities and shipping companies in Germany.
We have an electronic logbook. That means I give my position every minute and enter the catch information directly. So 10 minutes after a haul, the appropriate authorities are aware of our catch. And we also give the company a 24-hour catch report at the end of each day so they know what we've done.
On board the Mark, the second net is being prepared so that the two nets can be used at the same time. Double the nets doesn't always mean double the catch, but always double the work. A third net must also be made ready so that fishing can continue once nets 1 and 2 are hauled up. No one suspects that the day will end in disaster. The ship's store has opened. Several times a week, the crew can purchase snacks and drinks at regular prices, and even cheaper. There's also free non-alcoholic beer. During fishing, there's a strict alcohol ban on the ship.
It depends. Sometimes I have a bag of Haribo in the evenings. I'm trying to limit it, because I'm also trying to limit my weight. Right now, there's a malt pilsner on offer. I think on this voyage everyone's drinking a bit of that, or just water. Or if you have a sweet tooth, then you can take a packet of Haribo or something. I, for my part, I'm trying to cut down since I need to lose some weight. This isn't for me.
I'm eating 2 fewer meals a day to lose weight so I could still eat chocolate.
What would you like today, Ralph?
A crate of non-alcoholic beer.
There are also cigarettes on board, but they're stored in a separate area that is locked.
We had some bad luck when the captain stopped smoking. He used to smoke away all our supply, and so did the other one. So we used our foresight and bought some Marlboro Gold, more than 2 boxes, 10,000 each. And now nobody wants any, so we're just sitting on them. Well, there have been times when ships have run out of cigarettes. I wasn't there, I just heard about it. You wouldn't want to be the person in charge of the orders in that case. If he's on board and it comes out that cigarettes weren't ordered or they were forgotten, oh man, I wouldn't want to experience that. I mean, probably around 70% of the men on board are smokers. If you're out for 3 months, you might last 2 or 3 days. But then, you'll be in trouble.
The chief works 12 hours a day, but he never gets a real break. His team consists of a total of 4 people. They're collectively responsible for all the technology on the ship.
From running toilets to the main engine, so basically the whole technical setup. Appliances, air, water, oil, pumps, everything really.
Ocean Trawler Mark is built for several month-long journeys on all the world's seas. Now it's out at sea off the West Greenland coast. Below deck, it's equipped with state-of-the-art technology. The diesel engine can power up to 5,000 horsepower. At the same time, the engine supplies the fish processing plant with power. The conveyor belts need electricity 24 hours a day. The ship is also equipped with an emergency system behind the main engine. The chief can actually control everything as long as the main systems are running.
The worst thing would obviously be if the main engine fails. Then you have a blackout and everything goes dark.
Bosun Dennis Bachat's team is getting ready for the next haul. So far, the trip has been fruitful. The men have already caught 80 tons of fish. Morale is good. The crew is now fishing with both nets. This approach is worth it if they come across the right schools of fish. But it can also be risky should something go wrong. The nets are dropped into the water. The sea is quite calm tonight. The team is hoping for a good catch. Both of the 80-meter-long nets enter the water parallel to one another. One part has already sunken into the sea. The sailors observe the situation from the stern. This is where they will eventually release the heavy trawl doors, which will bring the nets towards the sea floor. The ship is steered from the bridge. The mark is in the northern section of the fishing area. So far, everything is going according to plan. Suddenly, a problem. The sailor's emergency signal to the bridge comes too late. Blackout. The mark's main engine has stopped running. With no electricity or power, the ocean trawler is drifting helplessly on the North Atlantic. Both nets are caught in the ship's propeller. That's what has stalled the main engine. The diesel engine has failed, and with it, the ship's power supply. The emergency generator has been started and is carrying out the ship's most essential functions. For the technicians, this is the worst-case scenario.
All I know is that the net got into the propeller, so now we're obviously trying to get power using the backup motor. And then we'll obviously try to get the net back out of there.
For now, the sailors can't do anything except wait for instructions. The first steersman tries to scout the situation out for himself.
Both of our nets are in the propeller, which has caused the net to coil up, and now it's just sitting there. Now we're trying to get it back on track. First, we need power so we can use the winch, and then we'll see how it goes. We'll try to turn the propeller, see if it's getting any looser. Yeah, and then we'll see.
Now the ship is rudderless and powerless, drifting through the North Atlantic. The nets need to be removed from the ship's propeller as quickly as possible. The chief goes back into the engine room, where he will attempt to start the backup diesel motor. Without power, the processing plant has also been brought to a standstill.
I need power to function.
Yeah, but there's no power anyway. It doesn't matter.
Use a high voltage current. That's faster than light current.
12 volts or high voltage current, whatever works.
The processing plant needs to run uninterrupted in order for the crew to make good money. But for now, nothing is happening down here. The crew on the ocean trawler Mark is attempting to salvage whatever is still salvageable. The remaining fish need to be removed from the conveyor belt for processing.
Let's keep going. Wait, there's still some fish on the belt. Crap.
We have to reset everything and then wait. Because you need water to clean the fish before you can start processing.
The freezers have also stopped working. The men have to wait for the backup diesel engine to start. Until then, they can only package whatever is left on the end of the belt. The technicians need to start the backup engine to reboot the power supply. The main engine is no longer able to start since it has stalled. In the fish processing plant, some appliances are still working using the emergency power supply, but there isn't enough to power the entire facility. Now and then, something starts up, but it isn't enough to reboot the plant. Back on deck, the sailors prepare lines. They want to try to pull the nets out of the propeller. But the heavy winches need a lot of power. The ocean trawler's propeller is blocked. Both nets got caught on it at the same time. The men are trying desperately to salvage something from this disaster. Might there be a way to release both nets from the propeller? In the engine room, the mechanics are trying to start the main engine, but nothing is working. They need the backup motor to produce the required power. Lacking a complete power supply, the plant is at a standstill. At worst, the last catch could be lost completely. The Mark is functioning via several backup systems, including the auxiliary diesel engine. Once this is started, the plant and the rest of the ship are supplied with the electricity they need.
It's back on now. Magic hands.
Deal with the freezer, please. What a mess.
There isn't enough power for everything.
Look up there. What's going on?
Is there a backup plan for times like these?
We won't be able to do it anyway.
Yeah, cry for help and leave? We have to wait until we get the go-ahead from down below. Until then, we can't do anything else.
The workers in the fish processing plant can now process the last catch. No more supplies will be delivered.
S.
It's all S stock.
Are you processing everything that's left?
Yes, now we finish what we can, emptying the containers, B stock and main stock, L and XL. And then we'll wait and see. We also can't use any of our freezers or hydraulics. I don't know if the machine will make it.
On deck, the sailors get ready. They're preparing to hoist the nets out of the propeller using heavy ropes. Both nets have gotten entangled in the ocean trawler's propeller. The backup diesel engine is supposed to provide the energy needed for the winches. With a traction force of several tons, the nets are heaved back on deck. But they aren't actually moving out of the propeller, they're only becoming taut. The crew abandons the maneuver. If the nets were to tear, it could cause even more damage.
Now we have two options. Either we get divers to go down and cut it loose, or we get towed back. Either way, we'd be using divers. As it stands, there's really nothing we can do here ourselves.
The diesel engine is working and producing power, but the propeller is blocked and the rudder has also stopped. The attempt to pull the net out of the propeller has failed. The trawler's voyage has been helplessly cut short.
I can't see a way forward. The engine is stopped, same with the crankshaft and the back propeller. No more power. It's gone black. Good night. Thankfully, we have this backup diesel engine that we can still use for power supply.
Both nets were caught on the propeller and got tangled. The nets are extremely strong and flexible, made for deep-sea fishing.
I guess that around 20 meters of it are in there. And the forces and the pistons and the shaft are huge. So if a net gets caught like that, there's no getting it out, since there is such an enormous force behind it.
The situation is difficult. The propeller is surrounded by a metal frame known as a quart nozzle.
When it's in there like that, we need to send divers in, or take it back to a dry dock so it can be released.
In the processing plant, the last fish are coming off of the conveyor belt. The Mark caught 10 tons during the last haul. It could be the last catch of the voyage. The sailors would consider this a failure. The company will pay them a guaranteed sum, but it would be lower than what they would get after a voyage full of good catches. Ocean trawlers need to catch fish in order to be profitable. Now the ship is just drifting in the North Atlantic. The 29-man crew has been at home aboard the Mark for weeks. They traveled to North Greenland to fish for black halibut and make good money. But for the moment, it has all been brought to a halt. The propeller is blocked. Both nets were caught in the engine during deployment, and the crew can no longer help the situation. The ocean trawler is alone at this latitude. Its sister ship embarked on its homeward journey days ago, and it's too far away to help. Captain Sascha von Sta is remaining in contact with the carrier company and working out an emergency plan. An Icelandic ocean trawler is only a few hours away from the mark and is able to help. The crew has a lot of preparation to do. This is going to be a deep-sea rescue mission. Ocean trawler Mark is going to be towed to safety.
So we're preparing a tow line. The other ship will arrive in 4 to 5 hours, and then we'll hand over our ropes to get a connection. That's what we're building now. We're preparing it here in the front. And then they'll give us their trawl warp. And if the connection works, we'll secure it up front so it can tow us away.
The sailors are preparing the towing operation. Whether or not it will work is still unclear. The ship's regular trip is over. Ocean trawler Mark displaces more than 4,000 tons of water. The crew must make sure to use the most stable materials so that nothing tears. The men still have around 5 hours before the Icelandic trawler is due to arrive. Their position has to be exact, since this weather makes for poor visibility. Here in the North Atlantic, ships are like needles in a haystack.
I'll take the biggest that we have. Safety first.
The towing preparations are underway. With 40 tons of traction force, this is the thickest cable on board. It's secured using a massive shackle. Will this be enough to tow the ship? A sailor prepares grappling hooks. It's still unclear as to how the lines will be exchanged between the two ships. The grappling hook method has existed for hundreds of years. It has stood the test of time. The ocean trawler is still drifting through the North Atlantic, but help should arrive soon and tow the ship to safety. Suddenly, a warship appears. It belongs to the fishery authorities. The Greenlandic authorities keep close watch over their maritime territory and fishing areas. Below deck, the team gets ready for the towing operation. They still don't know whether the voyage will be able to continue or whether their fishing time is over. They all wait for the Icelandic ocean trawler, which is to tow their ship to Greenland. Experienced bosun Carsten Staffelde gives the instructions.
You'll be up above. If you see it getting too tight, then wait a little so we can raise the line. Got it? Okay.
The ocean trawler Polar Nanook appears on the radar. Now it won't be long. The sailors lay out a protective cover so that the cable doesn't get frayed. When a cable tears due to pressure, it is life-threatening with its ends whipping around. Searchlights appear on the horizon. It's the Polar Nanook. The Icelandic ocean trawler has been traveling for 7 hours. Soon, it will finally be able to begin the towing operation. The sailors have prepared the grappling hooks, which will allow the lines to be exchanged between the two ships. Still, the other ship will have to come very close. That could be risky, especially since ocean trawler Mark is unable to steer. The bridge of the Mark is in radio contact with the Icelandic ship. But the German trawler is unable to properly steer as long as its propeller is still blocked. The captain of the Polar Nanook has to bring his ship as close to the German trawler as possible. Harsh wind and waves make the maneuver more difficult. With a length of 65 meters, the Polar Nanook is smaller than the Mark, but still very large. After several attempts, the captain of the Polar Nanook manages to get his ship next to the German ocean trawler. But the distance is still too wide to throw the lines over. At the stern of the Icelandic ship, one sailor has prepared a shooting device. He shoots over a cable from the Polar Nanook to the Mark using an air pressure gun. This is a matter of seconds. The cable must not slip into the water. This maneuver was a success. The German sailors now must attach thicker cables to the thinner one sent by the Icelandic ship and send them back on board to the polar Nanook, which will then in turn send a steel cable back.
Now we have to see. It's going to set off now. We just have to see once the line is tightening, but it should be okay.
Ocean Trawler Mark is now in the Icelandic ship's tow. Everything went perfectly. The ship will now be pulled into the Greenlandic port city of Nuuk. Ocean Trawler Mark's rudder is nearly completely blocked, meaning that the ship's direction can only be influenced minimally from the bridge. The Icelandic ship left a good kilometer's worth of line. The German ocean trawler is unable to brake or react. That's why the ship needs enough distance to be able to cut the line in an emergency without the German trawler rear-ending the other ship. On the bridge, the first steersman is calculating the remaining travel time. The ship is now traveling at a snail's pace, and the fishing area is around 110 nautical miles from the coast.
It will be at least 20 hours until we are settled somewhere and can lower the anchor. We're not making much progress because we can't go any faster. It's slower than it would be if we could set our own pace. It will be interesting to see how everything goes, how it will affect the technical facilities, whether everything is okay. Of course, it's not great for everyone to stop fishing and go back to harbor. We're fishermen, and fishing is what we want to do. Our employers also want a ship which is in operation and catching fish. The upkeep of a ship costs a lot per day if it's not bringing in any fish, but there's nothing we can do about it. That's fishing and seafaring.
It's unclear what will await the team and the ship in Nuuk. The port city only has limited resources at its disposal. After a 20-hour-long journey in tow, the ship reaches the Greenlandic coast. The Icelandic trawler sails out so that the ships can come to a halt in the fjord. Nuuk Bay is a tight squeeze for a rudderless ship. From the bridge, Captain Sascha von Sta is unable to make the maneuver. There are rocky areas on both sides of the ship. There are only a few miles left to the harbor.
Two tugboats are waiting for us that will now be informed where we broke off from the Polar Nanook, and both tugboats will then set off.
Once the Polar Nanook cuts its line, the German ship will again be drifting through the water without power or direction. The water here is too deep for anchorage.
The tricky thing is that we can't really use the rudder, but with two tugboats that shouldn't be a problem.
After towing the Mark for 20 hours, the Polar Nanook releases its line to the German ship. Now the tugboats prepare to bring the ocean trawler into Nuuk Harbor. The German ship has been directed to an outpost. It's time for the tugboats to buckle down. The ocean trawler displaces over 4,000 tons of water. Slowly and carefully, they begin to tow the trawler towards the jetty. Now, Ocean Trawler Mark is in Nuuk Harbor. It should have been on the deep sea, but both nets are caught in the propeller, preventing the ship from moving. Just minutes after mooring, the first move is made to get the trawler moving again. A diver will be sent down to the propeller with a camera to give an exact report of the damage. The water here is 3 degrees Celsius. The diver's dry suit will keep him warm for 3 hours. Oxygen will be supplied from the ship via tubes. Chief Jan Prusing boards the tugboat. He wants to be there when the first images are sent from underwater. He might be able to recognize something. The diver is now at the stern of the Mark and goes under. The propeller is located just a few meters beneath the surface. On board the tugboat, a monitor shows a live feed from the camera. It doesn't look good. The nets have completely coiled around the propeller and the shaft. Things like this do happen, but it's going to take a long time.
He just been in, the diver's just been in North Greenland. It takes 4 days to go to all the trawler and the propeller.
The chief continues to inspect the diving operation on the monitor.
I wanted to see how everything looks back there.
Okay.
2 hours later, the diver comes back up.
The problem is big. It's showing around a lot of times in the propeller, yeah.
But there is some good news. The propeller itself doesn't seem to be damaged.
I hope I don't think so. I can't see something, and no oil spill from the axle. So possibly it's got good enough, no problem.
No one on board knows what's going to happen. The first signals are mixed.
We have a quart nozzle, which is a huge metal frame surrounding the propeller. If the net gets in there, then it's much more stuck. The propeller turns continuously. It doesn't stop all at once. It only stops when there's pressure. But until then, there's already a lot of material in there. It could be at an angle or hooked behind. We already tried to pull it out. You think it'll be easy to pull something out, but it's much harder in practice.
The nets remain caught in the propeller. The diver can't do anything else today. Tomorrow, he will try to cut the nets loose. He only has this small knife at his disposal. The team has already given up on saving the nets.
We don't think he'll get anything out in one piece. Of course, the diver won't have much understanding if we tell him to be careful with our material, seeing that we got it in there in the first place. He also wouldn't be interested in that. And he also wouldn't have any chance of getting it out in one piece. It will have to come out in little pieces. I don't think much of it will be salvageable.
The next day on board begins at sunrise. Ocean trawler Mark is in Nuuk Harbor. Today, the diver is going to try to get the 2 nets out of the propeller. The men on board are woken up.
Light on?
No.
Okay. I always have to ask, light on or off?
At the stern of the trawler, the tugboat is in action with the divers. After raising the diver's flag, they get to work. Soon, the diver will start cutting the nets loose from the propeller, using tiny knives against 40 meters of deep-sea fishing net. The water here is only a few degrees above freezing. The diver can remain underwater for a maximum of 3 hours before taking a break to warm up. The team watches everything from the railing. They don't know how it will turn out. Can the voyage be continued?
Now we know we have 3 or 4 days here in the harbour and everything is being pushed back a bit. We just don't know what's happening out there, whether the fishing and the weather is good or not.
The diver begins his work. Slowly, he lowers himself into the ice-cold water. Soon, he will attempt to cut the nets loose by hand. On board the tugboat, the chief oversees the work via a monitor. The diver is able to move parts of the net, but over 40 meters of it are stuck in the propeller. Working underwater is challenging. Boatswain Carsten Staffelde fetches ropes and locks from the workshop. It might still be possible to pull parts of the net out of the propeller using a crane.
I'm setting up a rope and a hook, which the diver will bring down, and then try to pick at the bits of cut-down net, so we can partially lift it up.
The sailors fasten the net to a crane so it can be pulled out of the propeller. On board the tugboat, a second member of the diving team oversees the underwater operations and gives orders to the team handling the crane. For the diver, jerky motions on the ropes beneath the water can be dangerous. The diver has already managed to cut one part of the net free.
The diver did a great job of cutting both nets down there.
Gradually, parts of the net are revealed. The operation is working. One part of the propeller is now free. Underwater, the diver now attaches the hook again. Using a second rope, the net is pulled out of the propeller piece by piece. The end of the net is in shreds, and large parts of it are still caught in the propeller. But the team is now able to get a clearer impression of what still needs to be patched up.
Now we've pulled it in, let's see which parts are broken.
The net is completely mangled. The large ship propeller entangled it several times over. It looks ripped to shreds, but some of it can still be saved.
The damage is within limits. Now we can get to work on the parts which are missing. Quite a lot of it is still in the propeller.
For the diver, there's still a lot to do beneath the water. Hard work at 3 degrees Celsius. He has the painstaking task of cutting out the remains of the net piece by piece. The chief is happy. There doesn't seem to be any damage to the propeller.
It's good news as long as nothing else happens from now on, but so far everything's gone well. We just want to make sure we can get out of here.
The diver's nearly finished. The sailors are stitching new nets on deck. Soon, Ocean Trawler Mark will set out for the fishing area once again. It's slow manual work. The men must stitch 40 meters for each net. That's how much the propeller shredded in both cases. The ship has 3 nets on board and enough material to repair or even replace all of them. Knot by knot, the sailors prepare the nets. They're hoping that they will soon be able to make money again using the repaired nets. While the sailors work on deck, the diver continues to cut the rest of the net out of the propeller.
This can always happen in fishing. It's not nice, and it's cost us 2 days. But now we can move on. After 9 hours, we'll be fishing again. 4 hours later, we'll have our first catch and we're back in business.
In the galley, the cook is planning a special meal to celebrate the good news. Liters of Coke and a lot of curry are supposed to eventually become a currywurst sausage sauce. But Sebastian Vorpitz is not quite sure it will work.
In my hometown of Rostock, we have a really delicious type of currywurst, and I'm always trying to figure out how to recreate it. Whenever I try it, it doesn't taste bad, but I've never managed to do it exactly how it should taste. I'm sure there are 1 or 2 tricks which make it how they do it there, but I'm definitely getting pretty close.
Ocean Trawler Mark is back on its way to the fishing area. The sailors have done their job well. All nets are ready for action. The hunt for the black halibut can continue. In the processing plant, the conveyor belts are running once more. The forced standstill is over. Soon enough, they should be processing fish here again. The team is back in business. The sea is calm, the best conditions for a good catch. Will the men finally have some luck? The captain is happy. The team has proven to be a well-oiled machine that can master even extreme situations.
On deck, das A und O von den Matrosen ist eben jeder hat.
On deck, the crucial thing is that every movement has to be perfect. That's the key to a successful voyage. But of course, we also need people who can improvise, especially with the machinery crew, where there are always repairs to be done. We need people who are really on the ball, who can think on their feet and improvise quickly. People who solve problems instead of complaining about them.
Ocean Trawler Mark has reached its fishing area in West Greenland. The men on board are now hoping for a good catch so they can earn good money.
So now we're working on the net again, cleaning and then throwing it out again.
On the Ocean Trawler, it's back to business as usual.
Once, when we were heaving up a catch astern, we saw some orcas, a whole family of them. They always come up so high. Their heads go up and down, up and down. You usually get them when you're fishing for mackerel. Beautiful animals. They really jump up.
Axel also fought some sharks once.
Yeah, I did.
Despite the damage to the nets and the forced stop-off in Greenland, Ocean Trawler Mark will finish its tour in record time. 55 days after embarking in Bremerhaven, the ship will return, having fulfilled its catch quota. Some of the crew's sailors will be back at sea just days later.